Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Surah An-Nahl, chapter 16, verses 106 to 113 we will cover today. Nations are responsible for their self-destruction. There is a verse 112 and this aspect is covered there, so I've given that title to today's presentation. These are the references and this is our contact in case there is any question, query on this presentation or any of the previous presentations. An overview of today's presentation. Only that is called Eimaan as per the Quran, which is accepted willingly after knowing the paths of Haqq and Batil. However, even after accepting Eimaan, one can give it up and take any other path in life. It is a human choice and there is no compulsion placed on this choice. Those who think there is no life beyond the physical existence in this world, their hearts and minds become sealed. And this is because of the way they live their own life, the way they make their own choices. And they cannot think beyond this physical life. For them, the door to self-development remains closed as they are unwilling to think beyond the physical existence in this life. Consequently, they will have nothing in the hereafter, that is no developed self, hence no further development. Next is those who strive on the path of Allah and in the process may have to suffer hardships. There are means of protection and nourishment for them in this life as well as successes in the life of the hereafter. Each self is held accountable for its own deeds and none will be treated unjustly. A township which went against the laws of Allah, despite receiving warning, their prosperity turned into fear and economic deprivation, and all this was due to their own evil deeds. First verse of today's presentation, 16:106. Human life is about making choices and then live with the consequences of these choices. Man kafara billahi min ba'de imanihi illa man ukriha wa qalbuhu mutma'innu bil imani walakin man sharaha bil kufri sadran fa'alayhim ghazabum min Allahi walahum azabun azim. These are the ones who do not accept Iman right from the start. Now remains that individual who after having accepted Iman becomes a denier of the law of Allah, i.e. he opens his heart to this kufr and rejection. These then are the people on whom according to the law of requital of Allah such a destruction descends that everything of theirs becomes consigned to a heap of ashes. But yes, if some task of kufr is accomplished through coercing someone, whereas on the inside his heart is contented with Iman, then there is no culpability on him. Very important aspect covered in this verse that people do ask that what happens if we accept Iman and then we change our mind and go back to a life without Iman, that is of kufr. So that aspect is covered in this verse. Further reflections on this verse 106. Iman is the name of acquiring conviction in the Quranic concept of Allah, accountability and the life of the hereafter, Malaika, books, Anbiya, i.e. through the Quran, which is Al-Haq. And all this through free volition without any external or internal compulsion. Furthermore, the Iman of the Quran is an indivisible reality which simply cannot exist with any contamination whatsoever. The verse here is describing one state of the human psyche which Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen will come across in the process of dealing with human beings. While going through verses like this, we should look at the process of progressing on this path of Deen. People become Muslims for many reasons which may not be clearly evident to those who have accepted Iman following the guidance given in verse, for example, 2256. La ikraha fid deen qad tabayyana ar-rushdu min al-ghayy faman yakfur bit-taghut wa yu'min billah. And then it is concluded by saying Wallahu Samiyyun Alim. That is, there is no compulsion in Deen, and the paths of good and bad both are clearly made clear in the Quran. And those who yakfur bit-taghut, who do kufr, they deny the wrong paths and then come and have Iman in Allah, then essentially they have acquired Iman. And we have discussed these aspects previously as well, that it takes time to acquire conviction. It's not an overnight process because people only become convinced when they see the evidence of their own Eimaan, their own change within their own self. Have we complete knowledge of this aspect of being a Mu'min? Few more comments on this verse. Allah has given complete freedom to man to choose any path of life for himself. Hence, it is not a crime if one gives up his belief as and when he wishes. I put an inverted commas on crime. What I mean is that as far as this life is concerned, then no state can punish someone if they change their beliefs, if they change their conviction and say that we do not now wish to follow this path. But of course, according to the Quran, this thing affects their own self. The important point to which the Quran has drawn our attention is that our thoughts and deeds have consequences for ourselves. If we give room to a wrong belief, then all that we do will have a negative effect on ourselves. Because whatever we do, our thoughts come first. So if our beliefs are wrong, then obviously whatever we do in life, they are not going to produce requisite results. And we can check that by using the Quranic criteria. However, when wrong beliefs are followed collectively, these will show up their effects cumulatively in the society in which we live, because these impact on the outer world which we create through our thoughts and deeds. This point is important for us to come to grips with, particularly when we are trying to explain to others that at an individual level, if someone has wrong beliefs and they work hard within the system, but their cognitive abilities are definitely restricted, but they go through this life okay. But collectively, if people have wrong beliefs, wrong psyches, then this affects the whole nation. And for example, in today's world, all those who are controlling the world, their beliefs, their own assumptions are wrong. And that is why we got mess in the world. These beliefs also affect our own psyche and create psychological imbalances sooner or later. The verse points to the aspect of being forced to do something under coercion, unwillingly, and states that this will not affect ourselves. However, here a word of caution is that it is not to justify our wrong conduct under man-made systems with the excuse that the system is forcing us to do wrong. Not at all. We need to be a model of a Mu'min even under the wrong systems, because this is how the system of Deen takes birth. Otherwise, we will keep compromising ourselves at every crossroad of life, and Deen simply cannot emerge through the hands of such people. And that is important for us to understand, that we cannot hide our Eimaan. We should disclose our Eimaan to others. And if somebody asks us that, what is your belief system? We should be courageous enough to say that this is my belief system. And if somebody tries to force us to change it, we should refuse to change it, because this is what our conviction is. Defining the behavior and conduct of kufr. There is another point related to the previous verse, is that only in the case somebody physically forces us to do something wrong, then obviously we cannot, we are unable to resist that. But as far as our conviction is concerned, we should be very clear and let others know. ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُ مُسْتَحَبُّ حُبُّ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا عَلَى الْآخِرَةِ وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَهْدِي الْقَوْمَ الْكَافِرِينَ. After having accepted Eimaan, only those people adopt the path of kufr who prefer the immediate benefits of physical life over the benefits of the life of the hereafter. I.e., until the time that there is no clash between the benefits of the physical life and the permanent values, they remain Mu'min. But when there is a clash between these, then the demand of Eimaan is that the immediate benefit should be sacrificed for the permanent value. But they do not wish to give up the immediate benefit. Hence, they abandon Eimaan. Whenever man gives preference to a material benefit in contravention to some permanent value, he will no longer have Eimaan in the permanent value. Those people who start to reject the permanent values in this way, how can they obtain guidance towards the correct destination of life? The psyche of kufr displays its signs. So some more comments on this verse. Continuing from the previous verse, here the Quran has described an important sign of the weakness of the human psyche. It points to a prominent weakness of being focused on the immediate benefits of life. The term used is astahabbu, meaning there is inordinate love for hayat ad-dunya. i.e., not looking beyond this physical life, whereas he has all the latent cognitive potentials to encompass the whole reality of his existence. We should bear in mind that when the Quran points to these aspects, it is not in order to create fear in us, so that as a reaction we try to follow its principles and laws mechanically. And that is important because if we understand it rationally based on evidence, then fear will never be there, because if we hold ourselves responsible and enjoy being responsible, then things start to fall in place and we willingly follow this path. It emphasizes the acquisition of Eimaan by employing our rational thinking and reasoning while questioning our creation and higher purpose of life. The Quran is not imposing restrictions on us to be accepted blindly, but is asking us to follow its proposed path so that we can get the best out of our life individually as well as collectively. This is why it tells us that we need to grow out of our default proclivities for love of wealth, material benefits, love of progeny, greed and accumulation, becoming power hungry, exploiting others, usurping others' rights. We have gone through some of these points previously as well, that there are certain negative proclivities which are within us, because Quran says that man is created weak and we have to overcome them. And obviously we cannot overcome these unless we recognize these first. Understanding kufr leads to the need for deen. To grow out of these weaknesses and attractions, we need Allah's help, i.e., the light of Wahi, so that we can first identify these dark abbeys of human existence in the world, then understand their nature and causes, creating the desire and need to address these issues, and then develop the conviction through the study of Quran, individually as well as collectively, that all these issues can be resolved through the system of deen. And that is the beauty of the Quran, that after acquiring a good understanding of it, we know what are the solutions to the human problems. And that gives us great satisfaction, great encouragement to remain on this path. We have seen how through tasriful ayat, that is cross-referencing of various verses with each other, the Quran brings different aspects of the human psyche before us. All these are important to understand and grasp so that we do not become deceived by those people who are not on this path. We have witnessed how by not following the path of the Quran, humanity falls into the abyss of every darkness which unguided, powerful human beings create in the world. This path looks a bit difficult and very challenging initially, but gradually as we come to terms with the finer aspects, then things start becoming easier and easier. And that is why Quran says, Innamal usra yusra, that with every difficulty there is a convenience, there is an easy way as well. So initially things look hard, but gradually as we understand the whole procedure, then it becomes easy. By stating وَأَنَّ la yahdil qawmul kafirin, the Quran tells us in clear terms that never hope that these people will bring things into balance and order. Never. So man-made system can never lead us to freedom from fear and huzn. And that is the bottom line. We should keep it in our mind all the time. And this gives us strength that the path defined by the Quran is the right one. This is the only path through which we can acquire balance in the human world. Without it, there will always be conflicts and chaos, as without including the concept of Allah and of the hereafter, the human psyche simply cannot figure out the purpose of its life as laid out clearly by the Quran. Next verse, 108, our cognitive potentials relating to self-development cannot emerge without access to the Quranic value system. أولئك الذين طبع الله على قلوبهم وسمعهم وأبصارهم وأولئك هم الغافلون. These are the people who become overpowered by emotions in such a way that the ability to hear, see, and to reflect and understand simply does not remain. And in this way, having become oblivious about their own profit and loss, they keep flowing blindly along the wave of superficial passions. Further elaborations of this verse 108, human thoughts and deeds affect human intellect and reasoning potentials, and if these are used wrongly, then gradually human beings lose the ability to pause and look for alternative solutions. This is why when those who become convinced of the righteousness of the Quranic path inform others, most turn away because firstly, they are happily pursuing their worldly life and being its beneficiaries. They do not find any reason for attraction in this message. And we come across this because if people are not looking for an alternative in their life, why should they listen to someone who is trying to point out to them that your path is wrong? If people haven't even considered that their path is wrong, they always are thinking that their path is the right one because majority is on that path. Secondly, they do not have any interest in creating balance in the world as they do not recognize the problems created by unjust systems. And this is the state of those people, most people who are beneficiaries of the wrong systems, that they do not see problems in the world because they dissociate themselves intellectually from the problems and are just lost in their own way of life. Why do human beings resort to such conduct and behavior despite being aware of the problems in the world and also seeing death staring them in the face? This demands our great focus and effort to understand the frailties of the human psyche at a fundamental level. When people are healthy and they are the beneficiaries of the system, the aspect of death never crosses their mind. Though in the religious world, people say that this life is temporary, we are going to leave this world one day. But deep down, if we question them, you will see that there is no conviction in terms of that they are definitely going to leave this world. When Allah states that their cognitive abilities of intellect, hearing, and seeing become sealed due to their own choices, it means that we need to delve deep into the human behavior to find out the reasons for this. How do we do this? And this is a very important point for us, that how do our choices make us blind, make us deaf and dumb? We need to realize the importance of our life. The ideal way is to start from our own self and its previous proclivities, i.e., how we were before coming to the Quran, and then carefully analyzing our path of transition to the state of a developed self. And that is the best. And there is a verse which is coming later on today, which says that you should concentrate on what you do, because it is your own self which is accountable, because the integrity of the self, the inner unity, is complete. It is absolute. If we can manage to evaluate our own self in the light of the signs noted by the Quran, for example, Eimaan plus Saleh deeds, then we will be able to clearly understand the psyche created by unbridled desires, emotions, and intellects. This also means that if we have recognized this within ourselves, including its transitional phases, then gradually we start to perceive the outlook and behavior of those with whom we interact frequently in our day-to-day life. During all these phases of self-teaching and learning, we need to see the functioning of the law of requital in the world. This is to be done through our study of events across the world and their trend. Errors are bound to be made by those who have control at the helm of affairs under the man-made systems, and the consequences of these errors need to be studied intently and closely. The verse sums it up by stating, وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْغَافِلُونَ, that they are totally oblivious of what they are doing. And the verse sums it up by stating, وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْغَافِلُونَ, that is, they are oblivious of the consequences of their living and the way they are making their choices and decisions. This is that state where the path followed is not signposted, an aimless life, being oblivious of the importance of their own creation, existence, and life. We can look at the root of Ghafilun. There is a lot more in that root. Next verse is 109. Ignoring the seriousness of our life leads to infinite loss. La jarama annahum fil akhirate humul khasirun. There is no doubt that they acquire immediate benefits, but they have no share in the bounties of the future. There they are in an extreme loss after loss. Acquiring conviction in the evidence of the functioning of the law of requital is very important. By stating affirmatively La Jarama, the Quran tells us that undoubtedly what is being stated next is true, i.e., since the future life is a fact, hence what we do now will have its outcomes appear in the later part of our life. For this, the Quran has drawn our attention to the passing of time. For example, if we can look at this verse where day and night are presented as a signs from Allah. If we are following Sirat-e-Mustaqim, then we need to be pleased that whatever salih deeds we do collectively, these will bear fruits at some later stage of our life's journey. And since our life is one big continuum of movement, hence the results will appear at some point in the future. Our task is to not give up. Eimaan prevents this giving up, and to remain fully convinced through continuous reflection and reasoning using Quranic guidance. This needs mutual reminding as well. And that is why we should be together so that we can guide each other. We can tell each other that this is where things are right, this is where the things have gone wrong. Then the verse emphatically states, based on evidence, that such people will be in a state of loss after loss, as the wrong paths can never produce positive results in the long run. And this is important because people who are not on the path of the Quran, they think that these material successes somehow are indicating as a sign to them that their path is of success. The Quran does not call it a path of success unless one has Eimaan and do salih deeds. And we have gone through these aspects previously as well. But we should keep these in mind, that material successes under the man-made systems should not be taken as a sign of success, because this is a great self-deception in which we will find ourselves, and ourself will not develop on those lines to which the Quran is pointing our attention. Hence, not to be deceived by short-term gains on the wrong paths of life. Mu'minin need to remain aware of this fact. Next verse 110, Sirat-e-Mustaqim is signposted by Allah. Summa inna rabbaka lillazina hajaru min ba'de ma futinu summa jahadu wa sabaru inna rabbaka min ba'deha la ghafurur rahim. Those people whose heart is contented on Eimaan, their state is such that when severe hardships are thrown at them, even then their steps do not waver. So much so that where there is a clash between their Eimaan and their homeland, then they say goodbye to their home and do not abandon Eimaan, and in this way migrate to such a place which is more suitable for the demands of their Eimaan. There they keep persistently striving for the establishment of the divine system and confront every hardship with great resoluteness and determination. These are those people towards whom, after such severe hardships and difficulties, the means of protection and nourishment are bestowed from the direction of the divine system. Striving on the path of Rububiyat can never let us down. After mentioning the consequence of not taking the hereafter into account, here the Quran has stated firmly that those who strive for the cause of their Rabb, the aim of Deen, they need to remain reassured that their path will lead them to success despite hardships. Regarding hardships, we need not be fearful. In fact, we should expect these, as we can figure out in advance the nature of these hardships to be encountered on this path. Because Quran is telling us that this path is not easy initially. And that is why the worst part is that one has to leave home and wherever one is living and move to another land where things are better than the previous one. And in case the deen is established somewhere, then the Quran directs us to move there. The main reason for these hardships, for example, in today's world, is that no Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen has emerged to establish the system of Allah since the earlier era of Islam. We are now familiar with the reasons for this lapse on the part of those who claim to be the custodians of the Book of Allah. One of the hardships to which the Quran has drawn our attention is the issue of migrating from the land which we call our homes. This is due to strong opposition and at times persecutions by the opponents of Deen. No one wants to leave their home where they have conveniences of life and they are comfortably settled in. But at times these things become essential in case one is aiming for the system of Deen. This is the reason that the Quran has emphasized never to become attached to any piece of land in the world as mu'mineen. For example, Quran says, Ya ibadi allazina amanu inna ardi wasi'atun fa'iyya fa'budun. O my servants who have accepted Eimaan, truly spacious is my earth, so obey me. So Quran is defining that you have to follow Allah's laws, and the place where you're living, these should be easily followed. These should be through the system of deen. If it is not there, then obviously we have to strive for it. Again, verse 110, some more comments. This striving on the path of Rububiyat has protection and growth built into it. In another verse, it is stated, Am hasibtum an tadkhulul jannata wa lamma yatikum matalul lazina khalaw min qablikum massathumul basa'u wa darra'u wa zulzilu. We can look at the rest of the verse in Surah Al-Baqarah. Or you think you will enter Jannat without such as faced by those who came before you? They encountered suffering and adversity and were so shaken. So this happened to previously as well to Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen, that under the man-made system, they were resisted, they were enemies and they were opposed, but they stuck to their path of Sirat-e-Mustaqim, and gradually things started to fall in place. Human beings bear severe hardships and suffering if they firstly know the cause for it, secondly, they know that it is temporary, and thirdly, they have strong assurance that they will come out successfully at the other end. We experience this even under man-made systems, that we have to work very hard to establish ourselves, and then gradually things start to become easier. And if we can anticipate and if we can foresee the problems on our path, then it is easier to deal with those problems, because then we look for solutions. We see this being displayed by those who undergo the difficulties of cancer treatment, for example, and remain positive and bear all the hardships. That if people have hope that they can come out of this bad disease or cancer, then they are very hopeful and they do their best and they undergo very severe treatment like chemotherapy. But if they are not hopeful, then a lot of people give up as well. Here, once we acquire Eimaan through the Quran, we know that success is on our side and it is guaranteed. And hence we are not only prepared, but look forward to the success awaiting us as a return for our efforts on this path of Allah. And that is important, that we should continuously check that how much we are committed to this path. And if difficulties and challenges come on this path, then we are willing to face those challenges and hardships. And the verse beautifully concludes by declaring again that Inna Rabbaka min ba'diha la ghafurur rahim. See, the word Rabb is appearing over here in relation to Rububiyat, and which means that we are sticking to our path of life. And then there are two aspects here of protection as well as nourishment. Surely your Rabb, that is the system of Rububiyat, will provide protection and nourishment for further growth. Next verse 111, we need to look for signs within our psyche. Yawma yati kullu nafsin tujadilu an nafsiha wa tuwaffa kullu nafsin ma amilat wa hum la yuzlamun. Very important aspect covered in this verse in relation to human self. That which is stated above, that the end of those who tread on the wrong path is destruction, will take place at that time when the outcomes of the deeds become unveiled in front of them. Seeing these, every wrongdoer will start quarreling with his own self. He will curse himself that why did I do all this? But at that time, nothing will be achieved from this cursing and self-condemnation. At that time, the outcomes of deeds will appear in totality in front, and whatever will happen to anyone will be the outcome of his own deeds. No one will be treated unjustly. And we see in man-made systems as well, when nations, societies, people run into problems, then they start looking for excuses, they start looking for people around them who can be made scapegoats, and there is a horrendous amount of accusation and counter-accusation goes on in all spheres of life under man-made system. And we can see that being displayed on media channels. Further elaboration of this verse invites us to stretch our imagination to its extremities in the light of the Quranic value system in order to come to grips with our future life, which extends far beyond our physical severance from this world. And this is important as well for us to keep it in mind that our life will not end with death. And this encourages us to stay on this path and remain firm. Though it might seem that this may be for those who do not think that they are accountable for what they do here in this life, the Quran is reminding them that it is not the case. Accountability is built within each human self. A time will arrive in your life where you will think about your past life and what exactly you did to live it. Human beings simply cannot avoid their past, and it keeps coming back in glimpses even during our very busy life. And this is another aspect that under the system of deen, people will be happy to discuss these things, that how was their past and how their future is going to be under the system. Because seeing the past from where they started, which was not great under the man-made systems, they will be able to see the evidence of the goodness coming out of the system of deen. Of course, during old age, since we have more time on our hands, these memories from the past do come to mind. If we have acquired Quranic understanding by then, we can compare the two different phases of our life. And I put it down through my own experience as well, and of course, after discussing with many. Just see how the Quran puts a line of differentiation between the two different states of the human self by saying, Yawma yati kullu nafsin tujadilu an nafsiha. A time will come in the life of a self where it will be in confrontation with its own self. Very important. We will be questioning our own self, that why did we do wrong in the past? And of course, when we have done a lot of good, that assures us of a better future. Holding oneself accountable leads to acquiring Quranic vision. When this stage will arrive, the self will know what it has left behind and what it is taking forward for its life of tomorrow. This is towards which the Quran has invited our reflection. Alimat nafsum ma qaddamat wa akharat. Every self will know what it has sent forward and what it has left behind. This should be seen as the tale of human existence, and we need to come to terms with it by taking this life of ours very seriously rather than as a pastime. And these verses are great, that these should be actually displayed, these should be explained frequently on media as well, because people need reminding. Rather than accusing each other and spreading fear in the world, verses like this help to understand the seriousness of our existence in this life. Look at the state of the Muslim world, which has ignored the permanent values of the Quran for centuries and what the law of requital has done to them. Backwardness in every field of life in the world, finding themselves begging at the doors of those about whom the Quran had stated clearly. And I've quoted this verse over here, but I haven't gone into the details and the translation of it. Best is to look in chapter 5, verse 51. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu la tattakhizul yahuda wan nasara awliya'a ba'duhum awliya'u ba'din wa man yatawallahum minkum fa innahu minhum inna allaha la yahdil qawmaz zalimin. And what the verse in gist is saying is that Mu'mineen, once the system of deen has been established and has started to take shape, they are warned, they are given a guidance that do not make friendships with the Yahud and Nasara, because they are friends of each other and they will never be friendly towards you because they have already opposed your system. They have already opposed deen. And secondly, we should look at our own self and the self of those who haven't accepted this path, that there is a clear line of differentiation between the two. So how can they be friends of each other? How can their hearts be united? Because the hearts, those whose hearts are united are the ones who are mu'mineen. وَمَنْ يَتَوَلَّهُمْ مِنْكُمْ فَإِنَّهُ مِنْهُمْ. And over here, Quran has given a very straightforward and a strict warning that those who, despite this warning of Allah, go towards them, that means they haven't really become mu'mineen of the Quran and they become part of the other party then. And that is a very serious issue to which the Quran is drawing our attention. Inna Allaha la yahdil qawmaz zalimin. And as a result, people do injustice to themselves. They need to pause and reflect on every verse of the Quran. And in the light of this verse, we can see what is the state of the world today as far as Muslims are concerned. Then the Quran sums up by declaring that Wahum la yuzlamun, in the domain of the functioning of the law of requital, no one is treated unjustly. Hence, stop supplicating and get on with coming to terms with the laws of Allah from the Quran and establish the system of Deen. And then see how your fortune changes to respect, dignity, and freedom from fear and grief. Because if I do not recognize my own intrinsic respect and dignity, which the Quran is giving me, how can I give that respect and dignity to others if I'm the one who has established the man-made system? And those are that is the kind of a question we should ask ourselves as we go through the Quran. Next verse is 112, the procedure for the self-destruction of nations. وَضَرَبَ اللَّهُ مَثَلًا قَرْيَةً كَانَتْ آمِنَةً مُطْمَئِنَّةً يَأْتِيهَا رِزْقُهَا رَغَدًا مِنْ كُلِّ مَكَانٍ فَكَفَرَتْ بِأَنْعُمِ اللَّهِ فَأَذَاقَهَا اللَّهُ لِبَاسَ الْجُوعِ وَالْخَوْفِ بِمَا كَانُوا يَصْنَعُونَ. There was a township which had peace from external dangers and tranquility from internal strife. The means of sustenance, that is rizq, were being attracted towards it from all directions. And with respect to rizq, we should remember that it should be provided in ample quantity and at the time when it is required. Its inhabitants were thriving and very affluent, but they did not appreciate these bounties, and they displayed kufr, these bounties of Allah. The rich and powerful started to hoard and conceal these means of sustenance, and we see this happening in today's world. The consequence of this was that the azab of hunger and fear became imposed on them. Actually, what Quran has said is libas al-ju'a. Libasa is that they were completely covered by that. In place of prosperity, economic deprivation started to visit them, and their peace transformed into peril. All this was brought about through their own hands. Allah had not ceased His bounties to them, but this was the outcome of the wrong system which they had established for themselves. A few more reflections on this verse. During the process of chaos and conflicts in the world, we continue to keep in mind the consequences of not following this path of Allah by witnessing the decline of those forces which oppose the rububiyyat of Allah. Recognizing this aspect is part of the self-development process, and this adds strength to our character, which is so essential for the system of Deen. We need to acquire the conviction that Allah's responsibilities in the human world are carried out via the hands of mu'mineen, and that we are those who will do this. Let us reflect briefly on this verse 1612. The Quran has described metaphorically the condition of a township which enjoyed all the economic prosperities of the system they had established based on their relative values. The hallmark of this system was and is that they had plenty of rizq coming from all directions. And we can see that state particularly in the West. However, since its edifice was raised on non-Allah values, that is kufr, hence all such systems come tumbling down at some point in time. What were the signs of its decline? Economic deprivation and fear of all kinds engulfed them from all directions. And they created themselves. It is not that Allah has done it to them, they do it to themselves, and we can see the signs of that happening in today's world. It was not that they were not warned about this, they were warned repeatedly by those among them, but those in power ignored these warnings. This is referred to in the next verse. Now, we have covered these two verses previously as well under Surah Ibrahim, that is 14, 28, and 29. Those on kufr lead others to ruin as per the law of Allah. Alam tara allazina baddalu ni'matallahi kufran wa hallu qawmahum daral bawar. Jahannama yaslawnaha wa besal qarar. Keeping this law of Mashiach before you, cast an eye now on the history of worldly nations. Just look at the state of these leaders of nations who were provided with the conveniences and abundances of life, but they did not value these, employed these unjustly, and bringing the caravan of their people to such a market in which there was an environment of slump everywhere, deposited them there where there was none to buy their saleable products, i.e., plunged them into a hell of devastation and ruin. And what an evil place this was in which they deposited their caravan. Now, we have also gone through these verses previously, Few verses on the state of affairs around us. وَكَمْ قَسَمْنَا مِنْ قَرْيَةٍ كَانَتْ ظَالِمَةً وَأَنشَأْنَا بَعْدَهَا قَوْمًا آخَرِينَ فَلَمَّا أَحَسُّوا بَأْسَنَا إِذَا هُمْ مِنْهَا يَرْكُضُونَ لا تركضوا وارجعوا إلى ما أترفتم فيه ومساكنكم لعلكم تصلون قالوا يا ويلنا إن كنا ظالمين. There is a relevance of these verses to what is going on in the world today. We destroyed many such nations who were bent upon doing injustices, and then in their place new nations were made to rise. And here we can look at the history of nations. How do these nations go higher, rise, and then they decline, and then they disappear or become ineffective in the world? They were warned about the consequences of their deeds, but they used to not pay attention to these warnings. And these warnings were built into whatever we do. For example, if I put my finger in fire, then I get a warning that it is going to burn my finger. The imperceptible results kept creeping forward until the time that these became visible when they started to run away. And these become visible because they didn't want to see those results. They were doing wrong, and they did have some bad consequences of doing wrong, but they thought they will be able to get away with it. But that was not the time to run, and our law of requital called out that where can you run away to? Do not run, return to those hedonistic conducts and to your palaces where you felt secure. Go there so that you are questioned about how all this was built on whose hard work. And what was your contribution in this? At that time, they had to acknowledge this fact that they truly were unjust and were regretful on their conduct. And maybe this time is very close by, where we will be in a position to tell them what they have been doing for centuries. Next is the world is changing fairly rapidly in front of us. These verses hold great significance in understanding the state of today's world. When we come to the Quran and see the state of the world created by the human intellect, we feel overwhelmed and think, how is this system going to be replaced? It appears to be an impossible task. Here the Quran noted that those who follow the paths created by their unbridled intellect and desires are bound to reach a stage when their decline will begin via their own hands. Their power over their own affairs will start to diminish, and this decline will be based on evidence. They will, however, think that it is all temporary. Here the Quran guides us to keep persevering on our path of al-Haqq and to never be fearful or feel vulnerable, as this will affect our psyche. In fact, this should strengthen our Eimaan, as this provides evidence of the functioning of the law of requital. In verse 21:14, another important sign is noted that before entering the final stage of removal, these nations will reach a stage where their concealed crimes will start to emerge out into the open. This is something which we are witnessing via global social media. The interesting part is that this media created by Iblis is exposing Iblis itself. And that is very interesting, that Iblis is working against his own interests. However, as world events depend upon human choices and decision making, hence forecasting the future trend is quite difficult. The only prediction that can be made is that nations go down by their own deeds. We come to the last verse of today's presentation, 113. All nations get enough warning prior to their self-destructions. وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْهُمْ فَكَذَّبُوهُ فَأَخَذَهُمُ الْعَذَابُ وَهُمْ ظَالِمُونَ. There came a messenger of Allah to them from among their own people, and he told them that this is the outcome of their own self-made batil system. If they shape it according to the laws of Allah, then they will regain those same prosperities. But they falsified him and resorted to transgression. The consequence of this injustice and rebelliousness of theirs was that their destructions became multiplied. And finally, the issuance of warning is part of the functioning of the law of requital. This verse notes for our guidance that this simile, which is used of a town, did not end up in these conditions overnight, not at all. And we can see that how much pain these people cause to other human beings who are weaker than them and what they do across the world. And when their reckoning comes, we should stay firm and be steadfast on our path of Sirat-e-Mustaqim. The law of requital of Allah does not destroy any nation until they go through a period of respite and are not adequately warned by people living among them. Though in this verse we can consider these warners to be the messengers of Allah who had communicated the way of Allah to their people, if, however, we apply it to today's world, we can witness that there are numerous intellectuals and people with influence who are warning the powerful people at the top that their path is wrong. And we can see that particularly in a world which is dominated by social media, that this is going on every platform. In today's world of social media, there is no dearth of warnings, and if destruction arrives tomorrow, then no one can complain that enough warning was not provided. However, the correct warning should be given from the Quran so that people are given the choice of following the laws of Allah, for example, permanent values. Because all these warnings are don't do what you are doing, but they are not telling them that what you should do, what you ought to be doing. Why should you follow this path? The path of righteousness is quite different from the path pursued by the man-made systems. This destruction and punishment arrives as a consequence of their own doings, and they are caught right in the midst of their tyranny and injustices. The law of requital gradually starts to tighten its grip from all directions, and nearer the time, the punishment arrives from many directions. As they say with respect to war, that the fighting erupts on many fronts like the spread of cancer in every part of the human system. And with that, we come to the end of this presentation. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen.